Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Spark of Genius Flesh and Blood production with another one of these deck techs for the Spark of Mediocrity series. So this is going to be the Levia deck tech featuring Rob, my co-creator,
What?
co-commentator,
Me?
co-caster, co-compatriot.
Whoa.
He's going to be talking about this deck that he was playing. That he, if you didn't see the Prism Levia gameplay, you should probably watch that one to
Probably
see what
my
this deck
most
can do.
successful game of Flesh and
I've
Blood
never seen,
ever.
I've never seen
It was a little
Rob
sad.
just either
Curb
explode or
stomp
implode the
somebody.
opponent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. But this is going to be the initial build. So this is Spark of Mediocrity initial build, and there will be a couple changes be talking about in the final build. So
Yeah, so
we'll talk
the goal
about
is to
the
give like a deck tech of the final version, but I do want to just
yeah.
kind of look at the version that I had before this and mention some of the changes because it's
Yeah.
not I mean there were some pretty drastic changes to the deck, so I just want to make sure that if people are experimenting with Levia and they see some cards that I tried and they hear my reasoning for why I took it out,
Mm.
it might help them in their own deck building.
Okay, so let's go to the final build.
Yeah. Well,
Looking at
here's the
yeah, that's
final.
the final build there. So
Um,
we'll go through the equipment first. So you have in the main board
sure.
Carry On, Our
Yeah.
Wayward Son, Gambler Glove, Claw,
Yeah.
Leathers, Scowling. Is
This
there
is the
any
main.
sideboard equipment, or
Yeah,
is this
there
kind
are
of
quite a few. Yeah, I would say that the only
okay?
chess piece I run is the Carry On Husk. I have
Yep.
AB3 in the skull horn and the gloves. So down here in the sideboard, we do have a very nice headpiece that gives AB2, one of the best
Mhm.
in slot. And then there is the Null Rune gloves, which complete the AB3 package.
Yeah.
And there is this new glove, which is kind of awesome. The Grasp of Darkness, it lets you, once per game, you can prevent 2 damage and then banish it with Blood Dead. So, really good glove. It's especially good if you're trying to block attacks that have had attack reactions applied to them. Unless, because if you have like a block 2 like Crater Fist, you have to play it before the attack, right? But,
Yeah.
or I mean, in response to the attack, then they can play attack
And the
reactions
defense
on
step,
top.
yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, very good arm piece. The main boots that you are running in the deck are the Scabskins, to no surprise. Blocks 3, battle worn, and it lets you kind of go wider with a deck that typically can't go that wide. So it's often
Mhm.
fun to roll scabs, see what you get, and hopefully play out a really nice hand. And this, of course, pairs with the gamblers. So you're
Yep.
going to be playing both of these together whenever possible. If you don't run Gamblers, I probably wouldn't run the Scab Skins unless you intend to just use it for 3 block. But if you remove the Gambler's gloves and put in like Null Rune gloves or the Grasp of Darkness, the
Mhm.
fallback boots we have are the Hooves of the Shadow Beast, which is a very good card to once per game get that guaranteed action point. So if you're banishing something from grave, you can respond with the hooves, and then you can get an extra action point to play like a Graveling Growl or something, guaranteed. So it's
Mhm.
a really good foot piece that also does block 1 with Battle Worn. So you're giving up 2 armor, but for a guaranteed action point. So
Yep.
those are the 2 packages for arm plus legs that we run
Sure.
in this deck. And the last weapon we have in the sideboard is the Romping Club. Claws are usually what you run. They're way better in most circumstances, but the club, of course, just like many other versions of Rhinar, you'd run the club into decks where you can't really like keep a lot of cards in your hand. So you can pitch a single card club for 4, right? Instead of pitching a single card to claw for 3. It's just better value.
Yep. That makes sense. So
Oh, and I
I
forgot
think that
this
was
guy.
all the
I'll just mention, of course,
How could you
the
forget
the
that one?
prized card of the set, the Scowling Flesh Bag. Of course, this
Yeah.
is basically a must run. I think the only headpiece we have that replaces it would be for
And
Wizard.
barrier, yeah. Very,
Yeah.
very specific,
So,
yeah.
so you always run the Scowling Flesh Bag. It's just too good.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So
Yeah.
in the main, I see the way you structured it is like the 60 card main, and then you have like sideboard that comes in and out.
It's my favorite way of
So
doing it because this is just a way of knowing, like, if you don't really know what to put in your deck, at least the 60 tells you like this is the kind of the core. And
yeah,
in most situations you'll run these 60. But
sure.
yeah.
Let's look at the let's look at the non-attacks first. So like the
Mm,
instants, non-attacks,
yeah.
reactions, any of that thing first. So on the top row, it's all attack actions, so we can ignore that row.
Yeah.
Moving to the second row, talk to me about these Art of Wars first, because that's maybe a card that never really saw that much play in decks like this, but for Levia, obviously a little bit different. So talk to me a little bit about that one.
Yeah, I mean, this is an excellent card in the deck because It lets you get the extra action point. Well, it gives you go again, first of all.
Mhm.
And it also helps turn off Blood Debt. So you can
Yep.
pitch a blue, play Art of War, banish a 6 attack card, turn off Blood Debt. And in also when you turn off the Blood Debt, you also activate your Graveling Growls. So because you've banished a card that costs 6 or that has 6 or more attack, all of your Graveling Growls can then attack, because the condition was fulfilled.
Mhm.
It's also really good in this deck because if you pitch a single blue card for it, you'll have 2 resources left over. And a lot of the attacks in this deck cost 1. So if you choose the go again option with your Art of War, you can then play like 2 Graveling Growls because they all cost 1. There's 6 of them. You can play Boneyard Marauder. It also costs 1. You can play, oh, of course, the best card to banish, of course, will be the Slithering Shadowpeed. So you can play that from Banish Zone after you've banished it with your Art of War.
Mhm.
So lots of targets to make a really good single pitch blue card 2 attack turn work. So
Yeah.
it's really good. It doesn't block, unfortunately, but you typically don't want to block with it anyway. So that's okay.
That makes sense. Okay. A couple of the other. We're not going to go over every single card here, but talk to me a little bit
Some of them
about
are
the.
pretty like stapley, like that you're just gonna put in every deck,
Yeah,
like your
like three
barragings.
block. Yeah, three block non-attack actions. You
Yeah.
have the 2 reckless swings in there. The Doomsday is interesting. Is that always stay in the Doomsday, or is that mainly for specific matchups?
That typically always stays in.
Mhm.
Doomsday is pretty good into decks where, well, I think it fits pretty much every scenario. It pitches blue into wizards, so you're gonna keep it. It lets you also come back from the back foot if you're just blocking a lot during your game, and
Sure.
you're occasionally playing a blood dead card to banish 3 from grave. So at some point, it's kind of like a catch up mechanism. So I
Mhm.
would even keep it in aggro decks. It doesn't block, but there's a lot of cards in the deck that could go out before Doomsday does. So like
Sure.
Pulpings don't block. I would take those out before Doomsday. The Shadowpeeds as well. Surprisingly, they don't block. So Doomsday is kind of, I would say it has much more utility than those other non-blocking cards.
Yep.
So at a point in the game when, you know, let's say you're on the back foot for a while, you have a few cards in your banish zone, your graveyard is kind of filling up like crazy. You kind of string together like one banishy combo, then play Doomsday. Um, that can really get you back into the game. So yeah, I think it's
Okay.
fine in,
That
in
makes sense.
every matchup. Yeah.
Okay. Scrolling up for a sec here, looking at the attack actions that we have. Is there anything that is a bit? I see one. I see one right away with Ram Raider. But is there anything
This
you
is the
kind of
new
want to
one.
mention
Yeah.
might be a little more unorthodox from like the other kind of lists we've been seeing, or maybe has like a more pronounced role in your list or anything along those lines?
I would say no. The only thing that I don't have in this specific list that I did have in a previous list were the red. What was it called?
Rumblers?
I have the blues. The red Deadwoods. I don't
Yeah,
have
the
it in this
Rumblers.
deck anymore. It was fine, but the non-blocking really hurt in a lot of the more aggressive matchups. I guess in most matchups actually it kind of hurt. So those were removed. Maybe some decks run the blue Gravelings. I don't because it's not a 6 attack card, but it's still like a 1 for 5. That's blue that blocks 3. Yeah, everything is pretty much the bread and butter of most Levia decks, I would say. The Ram
Mhm.
Raider, as you mentioned, is a new card from DTD. And I added it in because it's not terrible when you pair it with a Graveling Growl. If you pitch a single blue, play the Ram Raider, bash a 6, play Graveling Growl, it isn't so bad. You can also banish Slithering Shadowpeed with it. So you can do a thing where you pitch a blue on a 2 card hand, play Ram Raider, guarantee the banish on your Slithering, and then play that from
Mhm.
banish. So it's like a 3 card for 12. So it's not so bad.
Yeah.
And it also blocks 3. I don't use it that often because it is clunky when you have like a 4 card hand and you have to banish a card. So you might banish something that you really wanted to play, or worse, a blood rush or something. So anyway, it's a bit risky because you are banishing at random from hand, but it can work in those situations where you've blocked with 2 cards and you have like a very limited hand to work with, and Ram Raider kind of fits that bill pretty well.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. Definitely a more aggressive card. Another way you can get that magical 3 card 12 that we all dream about.
Yeah.
Um, So that kind of like as you said, a lot of it's kind of stock Levia at this point. So let's kind of go to the sideboard a little bit.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of sideboard. You got your CNC
Yeah, it's
ghostly
pretty simple. It's
palimpsests.
it's not an extensive sideboard by any means. The sideboard is mostly the equipment.
Yeah.
But as any deck in this meta will run, we have three CNCs, of course, for any ranger matchup that we run into. Lexi's pretty miserable into this deck, so the CNCs just help level that playing field a little bit. Um, you don't run it like that often because a lot of decks can block it out pretty easily, but the Rangers is kind of the biggest um, target for this card.
Mhm.
We do have the good old recursion package. It's too good not to run in those very grindy matchups where you are gonna like kind of deck yourself out, because what you can do with this is you can play Howl from Beyond, get a +3, put it in your grave. Same with Ghostly. You can block with Ghostly too if you don't want to play it. And then later on in the game, when you banish 3 cards, and these are cards that you do banish, you can then play the Howl from Banished and then your Ghostly Visit as well for 3. Then they go back into your grave, and then you can banish them again. So it's a very nice package that you can use for 7 damage. Um, and that refills your grave if you're running out of cards from your grave.
Right. That makes sense. And then you have the sink belows here.
Yep, sink below into decks like Katsu, decks that have pretty annoying 4 attacks that have really good on hits, into maybe Briar, Snatches, stuff like that. So, yeah, just another D react to run. Oh, of course, into Bravo, Azalea, decks that just have Dominate or just really big attacks. So, yeah,
Mhm.
that's basically the story for sink below.
That makes sense. So looking more at your matchup spread here. So
Yeah.
are you considered more of the like which matchups are essentially are you the aggressor and which matchups are you going to be looking at a more of a, like a mid-range defensive package and then like bringing in like things like Romping Club and such like which can you like kind of group them together in such a way?
Yeah, so the ones where you're definitely on the defensive side will be Lexi, Katsu. I'm thinking mostly like meta decks. I don't really want to talk about every single hero, but and I haven't played
Mhm.
into most heroes to be honest with this deck. But
Yeah.
Lexi's a big one that I would say that you're really on the defensive, and against heroes like that and like Katsu, you're really blocking out as much as you can early game, and then late game, hopefully you get like a nice CNC off and you get a bit of breathing room, or you get a really good Scowling Flesh Bag off, and then you can just kind of take tempo from that point.
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea behind that deck, or that matchup. Sorry. You really want to look for a window where you can jump back. Also using the Carry On Husk strategically to make sure you block a really good on hit, and then keep your Blood Rush. Just go really wide. For the decks where you're the aggressor, those are decks that are going to be more slow and more setupy. So I know that Bravo can kind of do multiple things, but if you're into a Bravo that isn't as aggressive, you can go more. You can be the aggressor in that matchup, because Bravo typically wants to keep a lot of cards in hand for a really big turn. So if you catch him on a turn where he is saving up, like a really good Crippling Crush turn, you can try just to kind of go off. And so in matchups like that, your pulpings will help a lot. Of course, the Ram Raider is great for getting that go again. Art of War into Slithering, really, really good. If you can get a Blood Rush off, I mean, the thing with this deck, if you see Blood Rush, you basically want to play Blood Rush, even if it means taking quite a bit of damage, because this card does let you do unfair things, as we've seen. So if you can keep it, you can look at like a 20 to 30 damage turn if the stars align a little bit for you. You can get up there. So I would say that Bravo is a good example of a deck that you can be more aggressive. What else is there? Interestingly enough, Dromai you can be pretty aggressive into, because you can pop anything she does. So typically if she's playing, multiple dragons, if she's playing cards with Phantasm, and she does get an action point with her footsteps, like she plays what's a good Phantasm card? I'm blanking on Dromai cards, but there are a
Mirage
couple.
Metamorph, I don't know.
If she
Something
runs that,
random.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So Miraging, you pop it, Footsteps, maybe Dragon Swing or something. Um, you can use 2 cards for that, and then you can swing back with something pretty big. You can play like a Swing Big, or basically any of the 3 card combos that we talked about is fine. So into Dromai, if she doesn't have a way to get an action point, like if you pop a dragon and she doesn't have Miragai or Chromai, you're looking pretty good. Of course, if she has a Chromai or a Miragai, you break those, like you physically you target those with attacks, but typically you wouldn't really attack dragons. You would just wait for them to be popped. Is the main strategy. What else? Anything you can think of that's more defensive?
How's the Icelander matchup? That seems to be one that's rolling around quite a bit
A
lately.
little doomed. Well, it depends because Icelander, if she runs attack actions, then you're okay. But just like any wizard, like mainly Kano in the past, this deck can't really function that well because you're not blocking. So you have to rely on cards that discard, and the Meat Axe was a good tool for that, but it's not in this deck list. So cards like Wrecker Romp, you're going to want to play. Strangely enough, like you rarely play this card, but it's a card that you're really going to want to play in those matchups. You're going to play your Pulpings, of course, draw, discard. What else is there that draws and discard? Not much in this deck. So because you can't fill the grave easily against those decks, it's a matchup that I don't really think you can win that easily. So into Icelander, you really have to hope she has attack actions, or I don't know. I don't know what you do.
It's just
It's
pray.
Yeah, you really have to pray because if you're just pitching cards that go to the bottom of your deck, you never fill your grave. Most hands will not have attacks that you can just play with no grave, right? You have to rely on Swing Big. You have to rely on the blue Deadwoods, the Wrecker Romps, and Pulpings. Oh, and I guess Ram Raider's okay. But the problem with Ram Raiders, if you start your Blood Debt Train too early, and you can't banish more cards, you're just going to keep taking damage from the effect. So it's not very wise to play Ram Raider unless you can specifically target your Slithering Shadowpeed. Then you're okay. But yeah, it's kind of rough. It's a rough matchup for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. I mean, there's other matchups here or there. I think the main 60 kind of runs into a lot of the matchups, so
Yeah.
less so with this compared to like the Vincent sideboard, which had very
Yeah.
specific plans
I,
into the different pieces. Levia's
Levia's
is
plan,
pretty.
I mean, it's a very generic play style, a very generic plan into every matchup. You really want to make sure that you get out your the new card that came out, the Plasma Fit Levia Consumed. In most matchups, you're going to want to target this card as your main win condition because it lets you extend your hand. So you're kind of piling up your blood debt as the game goes on. And then when Plasma Fit Levia Consumed comes out, you can then play one of those cards every turn from your banish zone. So it lets you really get those 3 attack turns off a little more easily. Now the other card was Levia Redeemed. She's okay, but she's only good in scenarios where you really have to turn off blood debt when your opponent and you are both low health. And then you can start coming back with like, very good rate or higher than average rate cards, and not worry about dying to blood debt. That's really the main benefit of playing the Levia Redeemed. So I would say the main one that you want to get is the Plasma Fit. It's really really strong in this deck. And so yeah, into most matchups, that's your win condition really, and it's not too hard to do unless you're against a wizard. So don't count on really getting that off into a wizard. And into aggressive matchups, block a lot, right? You want to make sure you fill the deck, and then at some point when you're at like, I don't know, 10 to 13 or 10 to 15 cards in your graveyard, you can then start to, get a turn together by utilizing the Scowling Flesh Bag. Make sure you catch your opponent on a turn where they really require the card in their hand to go off. And I guess if you can get a good read on that, the Scowling Flesh Bag can save you like, I don't know, 6 to 10 health if you're doing it on a really good at a really good time. And of course, Carrion Husk is going to be a really good card to like flip that tempo into an aggro deck. So utilize both these cards wisely into aggressive matchups. And there was one more thing into aggressive matchups. Well, I guess the CNCs are always going to be nice into decks that really need their graveyard. So if you play a CNC and get them at a point where they can't really come back with much, you didn't have that window to come back. But that's basically it for the strategy of the deck. I will talk about the changes I did make from a previous iteration of the deck. So this is kind of what I've been playing in all of my games on stream and on YouTube. Um, One of the cards I took out was Nourishing Emptiness. On paper, this card is kind of cool because Levia has the unique ability to banish cards from the graveyard. So you kind of see where if you play a bunch of stuff early game and you see this card late game, and let's say
Sure.
you banish a bunch of attack actions, then you can play this late game and get full value off of the no action cards or no attack action cards in the graveyard. Or if you're turn 0, you can play it out. The problem is that never happens. It never happens where those
It's a
things
dream.
align. It's a pipe dream. And when it's late game enough and you've already accumulated a bunch of blood debt, it's very hard to take a turn off to play this card because then you just take a bunch of blood debt damage. So
Mm.
you have to play it with a card that can also banish, like an Art of War, or if you have to play it with like any of the attacks that can gain go again, like the Ram Raider, banish a card, then play Nourishing. That's basically the only time you can play it. So really clunky.
Right.
Took them out. I think they came out for some pulpings. So in this slot, we have 3 new red pulpings. Another card that I was very excited to play was the Blood Dripping Frenzy. It is a blue that blocks 3, right? So on paper, it's kind of like, it probably isn't. It's a harmless card to put in because it's a blue that you're going to pitch most of the time anyway. But this card, if you can think of like the dream scenario with this card, it's pretty good. Like let's say you play it from your arsenal, you pitch a blue card and banish 3 cards from your hand, and they're all 6 attack cards, and one of them's like a Slithering Shadowpede, and then everything gets +3, in your hand. It's quite good. It kind of does break the math a little bit if you draw into some good stuff. However, the problem is you don't want to arsenal this card. It feels really bad to have it in arsenal. So if you're playing it from hand, then you're at most banishing 2 cards, and that really limits the potential of this card if you're only banishing 2 cards. So, if it's in your arsenal, you have to commit to playing it, unless you run Crown of Providence, which is not in this deck list. So yeah, it didn't really make the cut. It never felt good to arsenal. It felt clunky to play, and you can't really pair it that well with non-attacks. If you have it in arsenal and then you draw into a blood rush, you just can't play this card. Anything that is not a 6 attack card, you have to banish. So anyway, it didn't make the cut. I think I put the Reckless Swings instead of this card, and I think one more blue. I think it was a blue Deadwood. No, there's 3. A third blue Endless Maw. That's what I put instead.
Right.
There was something else I think that changed, and I can't quite. Oh yeah, the red Deadwoods came out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. There's no Beast Within in this version. So in the new version, we put the Beast Withins. Very good
Took out the
card.
Deadwoods.
Yeah, took out the Deadwoods. Put the Beast Withins. Pulping works really well with the Beast Within. Because in the past, I only had Blood Rush Bellow to discard Beast Within. So pulping gives that extra discard potential. And so does the Reckless Swing. So they came back. I think it was a mistake not to put them. They're just too good. And I think that was it. Those are the main changes that I made to the deck. And this one I think feels a lot better, less clunky, and it sticks to the game plan a little bit better than the previous ones. Yeah. So that's
Okay.
basically it. Yeah. Any
Well,
last
thanks
questions
for
on the?
no,
Yeah.
that's it for my. I mean, we kind of went over it.
Luckily, it's a
Um,
simple deck. Sorry,
yeah,
I won't say it's simple because it's a hard deck to play because
yeah.
you're balancing
You
a
gotta
lot of
balance
stuff,
your blood
right?
debt and stuff.
But
Yeah.
the game plan is very straightforward, and it doesn't really change much from deck to deck. You're just blocking a lot and hoping to get to a point where you can just start playing your blood debt cards, basically. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Hopefully everybody like the deck tech, and if you want to see more, like, comment, and subscribe if you appreciate the content. And from wherever you're watching in the world, have a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Bye for now.